Yeah, you know what I mean? So I thought, let me listen to what he's saying. Oh, okay. I could ask that question a different way now,
Yeah.
which was, you know what I mean, which was sweet. So what we got coming up next? Little Red.
Yeah, you
Buffalo
ready?
Water. Yeah, we're ready.
You look at the eye, man. Okay. Yes, and welcome back to Ballers in the Middle. You got yourself Stephen Hutchinson, aka Hutchie Hutch. And what you got, B?
Hey, you got Roald Bledman, aka the Hater Machine. Hey, welcome back and thank you for coming and joining us today. Hey, don't forget to follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. And when you're on that YouTube, don't forget to put that notification button. Yeah, sorry for the little stutter there. But yeah, and on that one, what you got for me, Hutch? I hear you got something special going on.
I got something special, bro. We got something special today, man. And we're just still in our infancy, man. And we got something special. But the thing about it is, as you can see, man, we're in the confines of these little rooms, man.
Yeah, no
You know,
doubt.
we're running virtual today. But I got something for you, man. And I'm gonna bring our guest in right now.
Who's this man? Who's it that we
Who
got?
we got here? So let's have a look. And there he is, man. We've got Mr. Pete Ackerley. Thank you very much, Pete, for being with us today on Ballers in the Middle. For those that don't know, Pete Ackerley is the Chief Executive of British American Football Association.
Thank you. Very good afternoon, you guys. Yeah, pleasure to be with you.
So Pete, we got about 10 quick fire questions. They're just they're firing off. It's nothing. We're not like we said. We're not here to throw you under the bus. We're here to bring light on British American football, just like how you are. So they're just quick fire, funny questions. Well, I hope they're funny. You find them funny or quirky, however you want to find it. So on the first one, what's your favorite football team if you got one?
Right behind me, Manchester United and the New York Giants because of Lawrence Taylor.
That's me
Channel,
too.
Channel 4 back in the 80s.
Yeah.
Okay.
LC's for sure.
It was fabulous. Like everybody, you all started watching the team, and it was just watching Lawrence Taylor sack people for fun, or it seemed that way.
You know what, that man was absolutely crazy. You know, he was about 245, 250, running a 4.540. Man was absolutely crazy, man. He was. Okay, but switch back to me. Right. What's your favorite snack? Oh, and Pete has froze.
Snack.
Yes, your favorite snack.
Hummus and bread.
Okay.
Okay, switch. Go, Ro.
Right or left-handed?
Right-handed.
Okay.
Switch.
But I'm pretty ambidextrous. I can in a cricket I can bowl left-handed and right-handed.
Okay, sweet.
So a little known fact.
Okay. Favorite color?
Blue, bizarrely.
Okay. Switch.
Red or white wine, Pete?
Oh, blind! I just love wine. I just love wine. Probably summer white, winter red. There you go. That's
okay.
Favorite movie? Favorite movie?
Of all time, Casablanca.
Okay. Okay. Switch.
Tie or no tie?
No tie. Collar, no tie.
Switch.
And the final one, bun and cheese or bread and butter?
Oh. Ham and cheese, bread and butter. Probably ham and cheese, actually. Yeah, ham and cheese, probably.
Okay, I said bun and cheese, but we'll take the ham and cheese. No, that's all good. That's all good.
Yeah, cheese. Fabulous. Love cheese. Love cheese.
Okay, right. Switch. I'm gonna switch back up to Ro. Let's kick it off, Ro.
Hey, I've got a question here for you, Pete. I've got one more for you though before you finish.
Okay.
Fried or barbecued?
Barbecued.
Okay.
Always barbecued.
Well, you
I'm all
like
about-
fried stuff?
I'm all about fried, man. Yeah, I don't like barbecue.
Love barbecued food. Love barbecuing. Yeah.
I'll be honest, I'm going with a barbecue on that one. I do love a barbecue, especially like when you do jerk chicken. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna today, Pete. I'm gonna fire off on the first question. So, my first question is your experience and your background and the league strategy that you're going to present to us. Is it next month?
Yeah. End of October. So, in terms of the strategy, do you want me to just give you an outline of what? There's a base outline strategy.
I want people to know who Pete is.
Oh, who I am, right?
Yes.
Well, okay.
Your background, your experience.
My background. So love sport. There's a picture on a wall here somewhere my mum gave me. I've got a cricket bat and a football on a beach, and I'm 18 months old. So sports mad. Left school 16, got a job in a bank because where I lived, I was brought up in a council estate in Salford. So going to university, and that probably wasn't the thing. So
you was a Brummie lad.
No, so I was in Salford.
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 Right, Salford.
Yeah, Salford.
Manchester.
Yeah, my mum still lives on the council estate where I was brought up, and joined a bank, got a career, used to play cricket at the weekend and soccer in the winter, a bit of rugby, and career in banking. I did quite well. I got up the ladder and professional qualifications and all of that, and managing banks and departments and full career. I was one of those guys that in the late 80s, we all wore red braces and striped shirts. We all thought we worked on Wall Street, and we didn't, but it was one of those sort of things. But all the time I'd played a lot of sport, and really all I really wanted to do was be involved in sport. So early mid 90s, my mum's never forgiven me. Got out the bank, set up my own coaching sports business, and before that, then I was playing cricket. I then coaching cricket. I had a coaching business, and then set up and working for Lancashire Cricket, and then got involved in what then was no such thing. It was a fledgling thing called sport development. Developing sport wasn't really a career. It wasn't really a thing. I was right at the start of that. So mid 90s, did that. And then that experience in cricket at Lancashire, then I ended up going to ECB, working at Lord's Cricket Ground, and career in cricket through to about 2009. Then went across to the Football Association at Wembley and worked for them for 8 years till 2017, and then sort of semi-retired. So I've done 20 odd years working in sport, traveling, luckily for me, traveling the world, building sports programs in cricket and in soccer. I'll use the word soccer if that's all right now. We can always differentiate. And then during that period, sort of took on a lot of non-exec directorships and trusteeships. So I'm the chair of the Wembley Stadium Trust, and the Lord's Taverners, some charities that do good for use sport to do a lot of social good. Something that's disability sport, something that's really close to my heart, and something that always has been. So we use a lot of that funding to give people with a disability a chance and an opportunity to play sport. So, and then in addition, I'm a director at ECB and at Lancashire Cricket. And during all that process, someone then approached me and said, there's this gig called Chief Exec of British American Football, and do you know what? It was one of those. Everything else I'd looked at, I got a lot of opportunity. I was lucky. I got a lot of other opportunities to work in lots of different sports, and did it on a consultancy basis. But there was nothing ever tempting me to go back into a sport. But this gave me what I just thought was a great opportunity for the sport, and a great opportunity for sport, this British American football, and to grow it, build it, develop it, to give it some strategy, to give it some context. And it certainly wasn't a blank sheet of paper, come in and start. It was, and has been in the last 2 and a bit years, as it's felt a bit like building an aeroplane while you're flying it. That's the sort of context I can sort of explain it, because there's lots of things we need to do, but we still need to keep flying while we're building it. And there's a whole lot of stuff that clearly we need to do. The last 2 years, unprecedented in anything I've ever experienced in business or sport. So that impacted on the sport. But I think all that experience I've got from 25 plus years working in sport has enabled us to get through, to get back on the ground a little bit now, and now set a longer term plan to build the sport, to grow the sport, to professionalize the sport, to inspire more people to play our sport and play a part in our sport. And more importantly, probably use our sport, which I believe that was one of the factors of getting it. I think it can just do so much for so many different communities. And that's probably what I see more than anything that I've seen in this sport. I mean, every sport will always say, oh, we can do this and we can deliver that. But I really honestly believe this sport can tackle inequalities, it can tackle access, it can inspire kids to play the sport. But equally, part of that is building the sport so we are investable by either the public sector from the government or from the commercial sector to make us investable from and see a return on any investment that they might want to make. So that's me. I've had a pretty varied career, but I think a lot of that banking skills, commercial business, I can bring to sport, and a lot of that sports experience of working in 2 huge governing bodies which have many and different advantages and challenges into our sport, and then we can set up a long-term, and I do mean when I say my experience to go forward is that's a long-term vision. Anybody who thinks they can write a 4-year strategy and change a sport is sadly mistaken.
No, definitely not. It's been broken for a long time, and I'm happy that there's someone here to try and fix it anyway to the best, to move it forward, because it does need it, and it'd be good to see it to get back to where it was when we was playing, and glad that me and Hutch could help you, with that little journey as well, in any way that we can. We're more than happy to help.
We're delighted to work with you, and I think that was one of the factors around when I first came into the game. Yeah, there's when you walk into a new position it was right, everything's in front of you, right? But I just said, look, we've got to look back a little bit and understand where the sport's come from. I'm certainly not going to go and keep talking about back in the day, and that's what we should do now. It's got to we have to understand back in the day and understand the heritage. And it's not so much do things that we used to do, but we can learn from that. Still about looking forward, but understanding the heritage of this sport in Britain and how we now use that in a new context, in a very new and different world going forward, and understand how we can apply all those principles.
Yeah, definitely, because at the end of the day, yes, we got heritage, but there was a lot of mistakes made back in the day. So we like to squash them and throw them on the carpet and just move forward with the heritage, the accolades that we do have within the game. Sorry, Hutch, it's on to you.
Okay, man, no problem at all. It's great to hear, Pete, your past. You sound clearly credible for the role, etc. But I mean, did you have any? When you were approached to be the CE, of BAFA, did you have any idea of the number of skeletons that were in the closet and the volume of work to be done to construct a strategy to be delivered next month or October?
In terms of, did I did I know it was going to be a big job? Of course, yeah. I mean, you don't go into, and when you write a strategy, and strategies I'm thinking of writing, and I'll talk about this as we go forward, it's about long-term visions and making a difference over a long period of time. Quite often people write strategies which ultimately are just business plans. They're done for investment. Now, there'll be an element that we will do that, of course, because we will have to. But I'm trying to really look at, say, right, okay, so what are the fundamentals that we need to do? So my due diligence, if you like, looking at skeletons in cupboards or whatever, is
There's a hell of a lot of them.
Yeah, I did a big chunk of due diligence, and I'm still here. So there you go. So clearly, my understanding was not so much, okay, so you need to understand where everything's come from. Certainly needed to understand the challenges in the sport, but more importantly, the opportunities in the sport. And that's where I'm someone who, look for the opportunity in the challenge rather than what I've always heard for so long. And I still hear it a little bit from out there. Here's the challenge you're going to face in this opportunity. Well, of course, what's the opportunity? Let's embrace the opportunity. Let's embrace where we can take this and where can we do it collectively and how can we do it together? This is going to be hard with everybody united, fully focused on where we want to take it. It's still going to be hard to do all of that. If we got division and distraction, and that's going to just make it harder. So the strategy and the vision will be much more about setting direction, setting the big picture stuff that we need to do. And then I always use an analogy, and it's probably a bit rubbish now, but I always used to think about taking everybody on a bus journey. So we get a bus and we set the direction on the front and the number, and we know where we're going. And then you've got to get everybody on the bus sat in the right seats.
Yeah.
Who want to be on the bus, knowing where the direction is and knowing what we've got to do. And on the way, we can pick people up on the bus, and we might have to change direction a couple of times, but we know where we're going. And some people might have to get off the bus from time to time. So that's the analogy. It's probably not a great one, but it's that understanding of where we're trying to go and who needs to be on the bus, and probably as much in who doesn't need to be on the bus. And that's what I see as this long-term vision of, first thing, it was not the skeleton in the cupboard, but the biggest challenge. We've got to professionalize the sport on and off the field. That doesn't just mean about, as everybody keeps thinking, right, we're going to pay a load of players. No, I don't mean that. I mean our approach, the professionalism of what people do, how they prepare. You guys would have played at a time when the professionalism of how you approach games, that's what stood you apart from others. How you approached it, your preparation, your commitment, your passion, your training, the strength and conditioning you would have done, the planning you would have done for games, and then executing that in a game. That's what we've all got to do. But on and off the field, we've got to bring that. And that is about, it's not just about more things, it's about better things. More coaches, yes. Better coaches, more importantly. More referees, yes. Better. Yeah. More volunteers, yes, but better. More clubs, yes, in the right areas. We've got in some areas, almost you could say, too many clubs. But we've got big areas of the country where we haven't got any clubs. And then we've got to start to look at that and understand where those opportunities are, and then more importantly, what the quality is that we need to build. And that's the professionalism of how we approach, how you run a club, how you run a team, how you run the sport, how you run coaching, refereeing, volunteering. So bringing all of that into, and then more importantly, building what we are, which is a governing body. What is a high-performing governing body? And there's a whole lot of stuff around that. And I'm not going to bore your listeners with all the business speak that will come with that, but it's about really good governance.
Right.
You can't operate a sport without really good governance. Roel, you just said then about, way back in the day, there was a whole lot of mistakes made, and, was due diligence done on everything, and was it all? And that was because what was the governance of the sport at the time? Who was setting the vision? Who was creating all the commerciality? Who was doing all the checks and balances?
Yeah.
And all of those things. So it's the boring bit, and it's things like making sure we've got great equity and diversity and inclusion in our sport. It's about ensuring that we've got great safeguarding and well-being for the young people and vulnerable people in our sport to make sure they're protected. We have huge now accountability as a sport. It isn't just about let's get some balls out and let's just go and play and let's play some games and let's have a bit bowl, and it's so much more. You've got to do that. Now, people understand that, and we've got some phenomenal volunteers who are coming to support the game now, some with no previous connection with our sport. They just see this as I'm a fan, I got some business skills, can I bring that to the sport and help you grow it? And that high-performing governing body is then about building an environment which is accessible, it's safe, it's inclusive, but it's enjoyable. That's the key. Because if you're not enjoying it, that's the point. And that's really what I'm trying to build in this long-term vision. And I mean 10+ years. This is not going to be in 2 years' time we're going to look like this and that's going to be finished. It's going to be
done in a couple of years, of course.
Yeah. There'll be some things done in next year. There'll be some things done the year after, but then there'll be a whole lot. And by the way, as we move things, the world out there is changing quicker than I've ever known anything change. We've all got to look forward. We're going to have cost of living rises, price of fuel and travel, and costs are going to go up. We've got to be really understanding of that in our sport. We will be affected as a sport. Our players will be, our coaches will be, our clubs will be.
Right.
And we've really got to focus on that. And as the governing body, we've got to try and understand what comes ahead of that and plan and help mitigate as much as we can. I think we've got some experience now, having gone through a pandemic and planned for that.
Yeah.
So hopefully we're never going to see anything like that anymore, but there will be bigger and other challenges
that you're ready for.
Yeah, and we just got to be ready for them and prepare for them as best we can. Not going to be able to plan for everything, but we just plan ahead and understand what the challenges are.
You just mentioned there a minute ago about volunteers. So, what does your entourage look like? I know you're working and getting paid.
Yeah.
Have you got other people that are getting paid, or is it strictly volunteers?
No, it's mainly volunteering. There's myself who is paid as chief exec. I've got a paid operations manager, which is crucial to do for the day-to-day and understanding that, and some support for me, because like everything, as you grow a sport and as you grow and do all of those things for governance and finance and operations, marketing and all those things around governance, it starts to grow. And very quickly we have to do, and we are, as a governing body, just so everybody's really acutely aware, the standards which we have to meet and those minimum standards and the areas we have to, some people call it box ticking, but the things we have to show we can do as a governing body of British American football is exactly the same as the governing body of rugby, tennis, soccer. So we have to meet and comply with the same standards.
I think that's been going for years. You've got to
now,
comply with that.
Yeah. So as I say, I'm a trustee director at the England and Wales Cricket Board. They have 458 employees.
Wow.
So now,
yeah,
as myself and there's Amanda as the ops director. So obviously what we're now bringing in is a way that we're going to have to do it if we're going to professionalise and bringing people on short-term contracts to do a specific piece of work. Because what I've got to do is get that support, get people in that support us on very short-term contracted work to do certain things, so that we can get to a point where we can present what will be the business plan for our sport. Here's our long-term vision and strategy, but here's the business plan of how we're going to do it, which will be going to government and the NFL and commercial partners to say, this is what we're trying to do and this is what we will need to do it. There's some real key things we're going to have to deliver, and this is what we're going to require as a minimum to deliver that. So if you look at baseball, softball, UK, very similar sized governing body to us, very similar. It's an American sport in Britain, so it's a similar vibe. They're getting over 1.5 million pounds from government to operate their sport.
Even though there was a football league, Jesus.
So, and credit to them, they do a good job with that. Imagine the seismic change that could make to our sport. But first and foremost, we've got to show that we're investable. We've got to show that we can meet the requirements of government funding from a governance perspective, but also from a strategic point of view of how we can help government achieve its aims. They're only going to invest in sport if it does things that are on their agenda, which is tackling inequality, ensuring that there's high quality experiences for young people, for those who are in areas which might be socially challenged, and how do they get equal access to sporting opportunity. So all of those things we've got to do, but we're not going to do it alone as British American Football Association. We're going to do it, and we're going to work with NFL UK, the NFL Foundation, local authorities, other sporting organisations. So that's then becomes, so you've got to have all of those conversations, all of those partnerships, which is where, got one partner, you have one phone call. Once you start to get 3, 4, 5, that becomes quite complicated in its structure. So that's where I'm at the moment now, is building the plan and building, in real simple terms, there's 4 big things we need to do, as well as the operational stuff and the governance stuff that I've talked about. There's 3 key things: growing participation, getting more people playing our sport and getting them into our sport. There's the places we play, our clubs and our areas and potentially our facilities that we access, and how do we do that? So there's a performance pathway, because what we want ultimately is a 7, 8, 9-year-old boy or girl getting a ball in their hand for the first time, becoming a Hall of Famer. That's ultimately what we're trying to do. Yes, some of them will go and play in the NFL or the CFL or college football, but ultimately we want them to have a lifelong engagement with our sport. So we've got to work out how do we get that performance pathway, because some will go on and play at a high level, some will play where they want to play, in their clubs and in their teams, and they'll have a great experience. So we've got to give them that. So there's the participation, there's the places they play, and then there's that player, I call it the player pathway. It's not just playing for GB, it's where along the pathway as you rise up to it, when do you reach your level? And that's okay. And then once I've stopped playing, the big thing that underpins all of those 3 things is our people. How do we develop our people? Our coaches, our referees, our volunteers, the people who support our clubs on and off the field. It's an infrastructure that is the key to me. If you've got the people and you train them and you develop them and you support them and you invest in them, everything else comes out of that. People are key.
Okay. So just I guess just summarizing in my mind here, this is the long haul. This is the long haul strategy to make the changes that we need in British American football today. But what I want to ask about is we've had players playing in the league for years, and in my opinion, they've been pumping money. Players have been pumping money into clubs for years, playing the game, and in my opinion, there hasn't been a return on investment. Now, I know that stuff in the past, right? But apart from playing the game that we all loved, what's the current incentive to play in British American football today? Maybe like help. And how can you help teams to attract players as a short-term plan? Is there any option for that?
Oh yeah, and that you hit the nail on the head there. That is that the investment that people make, whether they be a club who pay a membership fee or a player who pays a membership fee, it's not a fee to play, it's a fee to invest in the sport. And my job then is to take that investment and create as much resource as I can to get back into making our clubs better, making our coaches better, getting our referees better, making our clubs more. It's not making our clubs better, it's making them more sustainable. So we work with our clubs so that they understand how to run. And we've got some great clubs out there. This is not me saying all our clubs need to do this. There are some phenomenal examples of how good some of our clubs are. They invest, they get their staff, they develop their club, they're engaged in their community, family, every club to do. We get that across the board, and we don't miss out on all of those opportunities as we develop.
Right. Okay. Because to me, I mean, what players are doing today, they are paying to play. Okay.
Yeah.
And when they look at, when they look at the landscape of the game today, it doesn't look as great as what we want it to look like. So the incentive to play, today, for me looking at it, it's challenging. It's got to be about the love of the game, or you ain't playing the game, right?
No, I think is we sit here today and we having this conversation. We are an amateur-only participation level sport. That's what we are. What we want to achieve and what we want to become is, as I say, in that player pathway, we want to give people playing in the game an opportunity to say, I can play at a high level here. I can potentially play, everyone talks about a professional league. Now, whether it's a professional league or it's a semi-professional league, or it's I don't have to pay to play football because I'm really talented and people want to play football at a higher level and so on. So there's that. That's the piece of work that I'm in the middle of right now, and I'll be my weekend light reading, if you like, is a report that we've commissioned EY, who are the big business consultancy, the biggest global business consultancy.
Ernst Young, right?
Ernst Young, yeah.
Right.
They've gone through a few names, but it was Ernst Young, they're now EY, Parthenon. But anyway, they have done a huge piece of work for us, and it's pro bono. They've done it because they believe that there's a potential for our sport, and they're doing it with us. So if anybody out there thinks I'm paying the global consultancy EY any money, they're doing it for us. So
right.
That's good. Now, what that will do will enable us to make really well-considered decisions based on, well, what could that business model look like? How would that be sustainable? Because you were there, you played in, and the leagues came, and it was hugely successful. Then it wasn't. And then what happened? There was a desert in the the 90s and the 2000s. Where did it all go, and why wasn't it sustainable? And we need to understand that to make sure that whatever we put in place, whatever that looks like, has got to be right for today and for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And we've got to make sure we get that decision right, not just go with the first, going back to my point, the first bus that comes along, we jump on that one, and that's going to change everything.
Right.
We've got to get back the right model. We've got back the right horse, if you like, to take this forward. And it's got to be sustainable. It's got to be right for the game. We don't want. There's enough people out in the world now who want to come in and make a fast buck. I see it across other sports. I see it all the time in other sports that I'm involved with, and I see it constantly.
Yeah.
So how is it, and how do we make sure that? A little example is quite a lot of the conversations I have is all you need to do is go out and get a load of sponsors. But let me tell you, no one's out there now throwing money around to sponsor things unless it's high-end Premier League soccer, high-end. What people are looking for in business are commercial partnerships with a sport for a long period of time. What I'm trying to do now is build those partnerships, build the value for them to invest with us and grow with us potentially, and see what that looks like. Now, it isn't just a question of let's stick a name on someone's shirt, or let's stick a name on the on the side of a Brit Bowl sponsored by. It's short-termism. How do we build a long-term commercial partnership so there's a value that we build with? And we've got to make sure, therefore, that what we're selling, because will be selling a commercial partnership, what we're selling has got great value back to the partners we want to work with. There's some great examples now in women's sport, because it's hugely valuable, and it will be for the long term. Now, I am so proud. We had a group of in our women's team, a group of players and coaches who went out to Finland and delivered what I would say is a phenomenal performance.
Outstanding.
They were outstanding.
Outstanding.
Yeah, and
Most definitely.
what has that shown me is, was it massive investment from us? No, it was some. But what was shown is we value that. Now we can now build. Now we need more 11-a-side football for women and girls to play. They need to understand how to play that game and get experience playing it. But equally, we've got to have another version of the game to attract people in, whether that be flag or whether that be a smaller sided version of the game. So we've got to balance the attraction of new players with the creation of the right environment to develop players to be able to compete long term on the world stage. Because whatever we do now, we're going to turn up at events and we're number 2 in the world.
Yep, exactly.
What we're going to do there. So we've got to keep that up, and that's what we've got to now develop. So on the back of that, there's a great opportunity for us, and what I'm now doing is there's as part of that participation and player pathway, there's a piece of work that we're doing, and it'll be, again, around the end of October will be, this is what our plan is, short and medium term for the women's game. Because we've got to go from, and some of our girls who played in the game, that was the first game they've ever played of 11-a-side football.
Of course, I know. I fully understand that. The girls in this country, they play sevens. Play sevens. So at what point did they practice to play 11s to go to the World Championships? To be a finalist is outstanding. So, that type of performance to me is ringing bells. Like, look, let's jump on the bandwagon here. Let's get some investment around that. And I'm not being biased here. I want it across all 4 pillars: men's, women, flag football. What do you call it? Uni football,
yeah.
And even wheelchair football as well, which we were introduced to not too long ago.
Yeah. And I think that's where I'm at. It's this is not just going, right, okay, we've had some success, let's just get it for that. What it's done as much as anything, it's making noise about our game, making noise about the British game.
Right.
So now the conversation, the media work around promoting how well the women's team were doing in Finland has now got us contact with BBC and other news outlets who are now saying, here's a story. This is a great story. What else have you got in your game? Well, we're developing a program around wheelchair football. We're working and leading IFAF on how that develops. All the countries are already talking to us about how do we develop that. And again, it's all about that. How do we make our sport accessible and inclusive? Those 2 pillars are enormous. You hit the nail on the head in terms of that participation element. University football is a real focus for us. That's what we're going to develop players there. We're transitioning from other sports, maybe trying the sport for the first time, and we've got to develop that. And the great thing about our university football program, we've now got Tonye Dakubo, who's now our university football coordinator, based and employed within British universities, but his role is focused specifically on growing the game, developing the game in universities, bringing other formats, setting up a women's and girls program in university, a flag program, developing the program of the contact game there. So that's a great element. We build on the club structure that we talked about and get those sustainable. We build this people plan to get our people developed. So we recruit more, we retain them, we reward and recognize them. And that's what therefore we build. Again, big piece of work that we're doing at the moment is really looking at the long term about what do we do with our player pathway? How do we identify our talent? How do we develop that talent through the programs? What do we do at the right age and stage of someone's development? Ultimately, we're going to sit with the 2 Great Britain teams at the top of the tree. But what sits underneath that? What's the programs underneath that? What's the programs below that? How do we develop the coaching program to develop that? What's the strength and conditioning programs we need to do if you're going to play at those levels? How does that filter down into clubs so that they do all the right things? How do you make sure we've got the right medicine support around that? And then the big one, I've got a 24-point action plan on my desk here. From this season coming,
right,
we've got to be compliant with UK anti-doping and world anti-doping, because we're now a sport that's recognised internationally.
Right.
So we've got to put in place now throughout our whole game, from grassroots through to Great Britain, through to the World Championships or the European Championships, We will have to be the compliant in the same way every other sport is.
So now you've touched on player pathways.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Pete. Now you've touched on player pathways. Player pathways can be engineered to leverage, students' athletic ability to provide an option for higher education, networking, and relationship building. How do you plan to create these pathways, and where will they start from? Will they start from flag football? Will they start from club football? Will they start from the GB programs? Where do you envision them starting from?
So avoid the question and give you another answer, because I'm trying not to be a politician. But if you've got to do both, we have to create the ambition of what the Great Britain programme does, and it'd be seen as being that's the ultimate that I can achieve. In terms of getting people into a sport, it doesn't matter what the sport is, whether it's cricket, rugby, you've got to put a ball, a bat, or a racket in a kid's hand early, so they recognise what that is, so that there's an engagement and an enjoyment and an affiliation with the sport. And then you've got to develop pathways through flag for youngsters, and ultimately, with flag being potentially an Olympic sport in 2028, that could be a pathway of its own. You can have people going into flag football, and that's what they play, and that would be that is an ambition of ours, and that will be a key pillar in our growth. Getting flag football as it's a sport within our sport, if you like. That will be a key element. It will be a great recruitment ground, but it will also create transitions. So the bit you're talking about there, Hutch, is we've got to do both. We've got to create a great ambition of that's where I want to be, but also we've got to get entry-level programs. We've got to work in schools and colleges and universities. We're still probably going to be, in terms of contact football and to a degree flag football, we're going to have people coming into our sport who are probably already playing another sport, whether it be track and field or athletics or rugby codes, or their first sport, if you like, at the moment is probably another sport. We've got to make our sport attractive. We've got to make it something that we can attract, and that's that piece that we've got to do. Now that's like any other business. That is about creating, great marketing, great social media, great digital engagement, ensuring that we've got messaging. Now, as you can understand, that's probably why an ECB or an FA have got 400, 500, 600, 700 employees to help do all those things. We've got to be realistic about what we can do in the really short term, but the ambition is absolutely clear about what we need to do.
So you're saying, so which one are you going to try to market first in order to generate enough revenue to help out? For example, do you think flag football would be the first thing that you'd like to work on in order to get out there? Because I think the other day I was watching the World Championship. They're playing flag football, and they're talking about trying to get it for the Olympics. Is that something you would like to concentrate on first? As in, it doesn't cost a lot of money to start that part of the sport up, and it's not less contact. Anyone can play. It doesn't matter how old you are. Would that be a good marketing piece for you?
In terms of, it's going to be a dual track approach without a shadow of it. It has to be both. So flag football is where we'll get and achieve the biggest growth. That's where we'll get huge numbers. That's where we'll get schools and universities and clubs and communities playing our game at scale. That's where we're going to get growth of 250, 500,000 people additionally playing our sport. That's going to come from flag. What we then have to make sure is that we've got, great programs, great product in terms of contact football that we can point cameras at and we can get real exposure of, and showing its quality and how good it is, and engaging people to play in it. In terms of priorities, we've got to get the clubs sustainable in the long term and investable and developing, and that is that real focus. Then we've got to make sure that through uni ball and women's football, they will be our growth areas of attraction of players and developing players. If I was asked by government now, are you a truly inclusive sport? Well, 95% of our sport is male, 5% of it's female. So I would be hard pushed to tell anybody we're an inclusive sport. Are we a diverse sport? Absolutely. Are we inclusive across all people who want to play? We've got to address the women's game. We've got to develop that. And I think we can do that through flag, and I think we can do that through Uniball, and I think we can do that in our communities of football. So it's a twin role. It'll be a twin track approach. It's not going to be we do that and then we do something else. We've got to do both, and that adds complexity and it adds difficulty potentially in what we have to do, and it's certainly financial challenges to the sport. But that's the challenge I took when I took the job. It's if it was easy, everybody'd do it.
You're right. It's all right. You're right. I hear that.
Okay, so I can hear that there's some talk here about flag football. Let's talk about women's football. About men's football right about now. Pete, we was in discussions earlier on, and I mentioned to you before, if we fly east, for an hour, you see American football on a different level. You have different leagues over there. You have the EFL, etc. And with regards to having something like that over here, I mean, what's your vision with regards to that aspect?
Without doubt, we've got to create a level of football which either prevents our players going elsewhere to play, or we create something that attracts more players to come here, so that we can develop high quality players to play for in our British teams, and it gives an incentive for our existing players who are developing here to play in those and play and compete against that quality of football. So that's without doubt. And the EY report will give me the best or the alternative business models of what that might look like. I'm certainly not just going, well, do you know what? There's a European League of Football. We should have one of those here. Or we should have a German league here, or we should have a league like the Finns have, or what we have to develop is what is right for British American football, not what they do. We'll have one. It's got to be what's right, and that's the key part of this. Some of the models we're looking at, things like the British Basketball League, UK Ice Hockey. They're the sort of sports. Now, I've had a huge amount of experience in soccer and cricket of developing, so in women's soccer or women's cricket. Now, their elite leagues and programs and structures were amateur, volunteer run, less than 15 years ago. Now, women's football, you see on the telly, the Lionesses winning the Euros, and you see the women and girls playing in the 100. You're seeing a different quality. Now, that takes finance and resource, but it also takes commitment and a clear strategy of what would work in this country or in our environment. Mm-hmm. What we need to do is what the Canadians do, or the US do, or what the Germans do. We have to do what's right here and deliver with some great incentives, with better coaching, developing the coaches to do that, to develop the clubs and get better clubs and getting more investment and making them more sustainable. Everybody, I think there was at when we were together at the coaches conference, there's people just saying, what we need is a load of paid players. Well, which ones? Are they going to get to the game? And is everybody going to have the same amount of money? Is it going to be a level playing field? And more importantly, right now, are we going to get those players and coaches into the country through our visas and immigration? There's other challenges that we're also faced, and we're in the middle of that right now, ensuring that we are the governing body who can license clubs and teams and leagues to create an opportunity to bring in professional coaches, professional players. It isn't as straightforward as we pass a rule and tomorrow we can have a lot of paid players in. There's elements of we can have overseas players in by a rule change, but it has to be controlled and it has to be the right, and it has to be something we don't contradict any way along the line. Our border controls or our UK visa and immigration service. So there's challenges at the moment all over. Lots of other sports are currently embroiled in some real difficulty getting overseas players into their sport, into this country. And we have to make sure we're ready for that and we're ahead of the game and we're prepared and we can do those things. It's all part of being a governing body. It's all part of being a sport that's well governed and well organized, so you can do that.
Right.
We don't even think about things like that when you just think, oh, they could just come over and play. Because obviously when we was playing, we don't know if that's what was going on, if they were coming across here on normal visas and just playing and then leaving, before the time was up. So, yeah, that's understandable.
I mean, yeah, just off the back of what you're saying there, Ro, back in when we were playing football and D1 football in the late 80s, early 90s, all the big teams, they had American players. They had, American quarterback, when American running back, American receiver, American coaches, they had that. And you're right, we don't even know if what that actually looked like at all. But just changing lane slightly here. I just want to take it up an echelon a bit. So Brett Gosper.
Yeah.
Yeah, Brett Gosper, he's the head of the UK and Europe for the NFL.
Yeah.
Yeah. You meet every 2 months, 6 times a year. And what's the top priority topics discussed so far to bridge the gap between British American football and the NFL? And what do those outcomes look like?
Well, the meetings we have tend to be now not so much, they're not structured, they're just because we need to speak more regularly. And I think those meetings will increase in, and not just with Brett, but with his team. We've got a great team of people at the NFL who can bring huge amounts of resource, professionalism, expertise to help the British game. So those meetings could be anything around the absolute shared opportunities. How do we use our sport to tackle inequalities and get access for all and get people included playing in our game? Absolutely shared. So how do we do that together, collaboratively? How do we get more girls into the game at an early age? How do we get into different communities? How do we use the power of the brand of NFL, whether it be flag or whether it be the London series when the teams come to town? How do we leverage more of that? But the point really is the NFL have made a huge commitment stateside and globally around flag in the Olympics. So there's a lot of talk about what that looks like. How do we get access to the, sorry about that, my phone's going. So how do we get access to their support to develop the game, get coaches over? How do we have clinics? How do we use access to the International Player Combine? How do we use their expertise? We've got the NFL Academy now in Loughborough. How do we use that as a focus to get kids in our British game getting the best opportunity to develop and play? So all of those things are now shared agendas. There are certain things that we're now working on. How do we use that week? Invariably, it's a week between 2 Sunday games at Tottenham. How do we use that to make that a high profile for the game? Not just for the NFL, but for American football in Britain. And how do we use that? So it's, Brett's got a phenomenal background, in my opinion. I think he's a great sports administrator. His job previously in World Rugby was growing the game globally. Now you can see why, therefore, Brett's going to do a huge job in growing the sport this side of the Atlantic, UK, Europe, and what that looks like going forward. So a lot of it is about just sharing vision, strategy, sharing where we're going, sharing what we're doing, and seeing it's like anything. When you have whether I've got a strategy or the NFL have got a strategy, the key thing is to speak to your stakeholders and engage with them and going, well, what does success look like for you? Not, I've got a strategy, what are you going to do to help me make it work? Because if it's not consistent and if we don't share the outcomes that we're all trying to do, it doesn't matter what my strategy is. If it's not aligned in any way, it's like government. I'm never going to get money out of government or for our sport if we don't have an aligned set of strategic long-term ambition. Because why would they invest in our sport? It doesn't meet what they're trying to do. Same with commercial partners. What are they trying to do? So the NFL working really closely, again, around the academy, around flag, around the growth of the women's game, but more importantly, how do we engage and utilize that? I can't remember, 8 million eyeballs on the game, each Sunday, more for Super Bowl weekend. How do we get and use that as leverage to increase exposure, support, and ambition inspiring more people into our game. So that's the conversations, and there's some real shared ambition around the growth of our sport. How do we work with government collectively? How do we work in communities collectively? And obviously now we've had the Jags in London and a presence in London or in the UK for 10 years or more. Now we've got 5 other teams coming and knocking on the door and going, well, we've got marketing rights in Britain now. What? There's another 5 conversations to have,
right?
Because they have slightly different ambition than each other, or even from the NFL, because they're all here to grow their fan base, to grow their brand. And what we've got to be able to do in British American football is, how can we help you do that? So the conversations around NFL and the 6 now NFL teams here in Great Britain is, how do we help you achieve your aims, but also help us grow our game? And here are the elements of what we're trying to do.
Got it. And so, sorry, Ross. So those teams, just so we're clear, we're talking about the Bears, the 49ers, the Jets, the Dolphins, and the Vikings, right?
Yep. Plus the Jags who are already here.
Jags.
Yeah.
Right.
So having great conversations with NFL and the Jags currently. How do we do that collectively? What does that look like? A lot of it, undoubtedly, across all 6 teams and the NFL, will be, how do we engage a young fan base? How do we create fans at 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 who then become fans of the future? They will ultimately be fans. They'll be in a stadium. They'll be following a team. They'll be playing the game. They'll be supporting the game. So how do we collectively do that the best way? What I've got to be careful of, and what I'm really interested in, is we need to have a schools program. We need to act and work out a schools program.
100%. 100%.
We need to be in those schools. Now, if I can do that with NFL, the Bears, the Vikings, the 49ers, that's going to be more profile, right?
Right.
So it's working out that it's done against a common program, a common process, a common understanding. If you're a primary school teacher in southwest London, and you could get 6 pro teams, an NFL and a British American football program knocking on your door. Well, which one? So okay. How do we work, and how do we cut the cake up, and how do we slice up the opportunity? Because whatever you look at, there's 18,000 primary schools in Great Britain. There's probably 3,500, 4,000 secondary schools. There's plenty for us all to go at. If we all try and go at the same real small area, that's not going to be very helpful. So we have to work collectively on that, and how do we drive that?
Why is it so hard to get into like the schools or the primary schools, secondary schools, to play flag football? Because like me and Harsh have this conversation all the time. It's like it costs next to nothing to play. It's no different than playing soccer. It's cheaper than playing cricket. But yet it's so hard to get into schools, but yet it's so much fun. Anyone can play it. Doesn't matter, big, small, it doesn't matter. Where, soccer, rugby, you got to be good at those sports. You don't necessarily have to be good at this. You could play it no matter what. Anyone can play it no matter what.
Yeah.
Why is it so hard?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Why is it so hard? Because, and COVID has enhanced this challenge. Is you just rattled off 7, 8, 9 sports. There are probably 20, 30 sports all trying to get in schools to get their sport played. Now, what we have to be able to do is engage and effectively show that our sport is something that can help them deliver what it is that the school is trying to do. Because that's their agenda. Their agenda isn't, well, do you know what our school must do? We must produce a load of kids who are really good at flag football. But their agenda is very different. They want kids with, physical literacy skills. They want movement and balance, and someone needs to teach them teamwork and communication. And they're the things that they're. Guess what? That's what our sport does.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
So we're not selling flag football per se. What we're trying to package up, and this is what, again, we'll use the brand of the teams and our programs to get through there to say, we're coming to help you deliver and grow confidence in your young people. We're helping their communication skills. We're giving them opportunity to be active, to do something that's really, as you say, Roel, really simple. It's someone's throwing and someone's catching. They're pretty much the skills that they're trying to teach at this age. Real fundamental physical literacy skills. And that's what we can help with. And that's why what we package up has got to be packaged around those sorts of programs. Just before the end of school term, I went to a great program in Birmingham, where it was a whole load of primary schools came to a secondary school, and the guys, UK Dukes guys, put on a program. These kids were, they played all day, they played lots of games. That by the time we got to the end of the game, the level at which they'd increased their skill sets over just one day was phenomenal. But what I saw more importantly was the level of engagement with their teachers, with each other, with their communication, their sportsmanship, and they got hugely much better at what they were doing.
Exactly.
So
they need each other in that game.
Yeah.
In soccer, sorry, you could be a great midfielder. You don't need no one.
Yeah.
At least with our game, it doesn't work without each other. Yeah. You leave a hole for someone, the quarterback gets sacked. You leave a hole for the running back gets tackled, or someone gets hurt. It's a unity. And when I retired, that's what I struggled with. And I didn't realize until ways down the road, I didn't realize I still needed that. I found it within another sport, but, it was nice to have, when I was playing, to have that bond, where you need each other. And young kids need that today, there might be so much things going on at home that at least if they got this little group of friends that they could play with, or even want to talk to, which, I didn't have when I was growing up. You find yourself just segregating yourself and keeping your thoughts to yourself. Once you got like a little team, you're able now to speak to each other, Yeah. Why? I don't understand why they can't see that.
It's that, again, it comes back to their agendas, what they're up against, the pressures teachers are under, and they are huge. I mean, what we really understood from COVID, and we understand now, teachers do such a phenomenal job with our young people. A phenomenal job. But think about the number of aspects that they're expected. They're expected to teach them, to discipline, to communicate, to improve their lives, to physical and mental well-being, to get them up to literacy and numeracy levels, to get them. It's huge what we're asking them to do, and what we've got to be able to do is say, we can help you. We can help you deliver so many more of these elements of that, and that's the big part of what we have to deliver. And we have to try and do it in a way which we give some of those skills, if not all of those skills, to the teachers, so that they can. It's like if you give someone a fish, you can eat for a day. If you teach them to fish, they'll be fed for the rest of their lives. So that's the element that we have to balance. If we just go in and deliver, they'll step back and let us do it. But they then don't help. So we've got to strike that balance, and that's that big piece of work that we can do and utilize all our strategic partners to be able to do that. And that's a big part of what the youth strategy will look like and be about.
Okay. So, right, I got a question for you. So it's regarding something that's new in British American football today, and it's the inaugural Hall of Fame, which was introduced the back end of last year, and the inaugural Hall of Fame, it commenced earlier this year, inducting players, coaches, management officials, covering the classes of the 80s, like 90s and noughties. Got a couple of questions around that.
Yeah.
Okay, and first one is what are the prerequisites to be like a Hall of Fame here? So if you're a player if you're an aspiring player that's balling today, what does that player need to do to be in the class of 2020, for example?
Well, first of all, just to go back a little bit. When I came in, I said, presumably it's an American sport. You must have a Hall of Fame for all these.
Right.
No, we don't have a Hall of Fame. In fact, we don't even have I was looking for where's the history of the game on, So yeah, got together a guy called Dave Tiswell who almost became our archivist, come sort of heritage of the game, and during that we said, look, we've got to have a Hall of Fame. So when you do the first one, you're going to have a whole lot of nominations and so on. But at the end of the day, what you're looking for is those standout people. It is almost the term that you're looking at a young player now and going, future Hall of Famer.
Mm.
It's someone who transcends and delivers at a level in the game that everybody goes, yeah. It's a nod and that's who they are, and that's because they do things that are extra special. And I mean, just in terms of you've got to have been retired 5 years as a player or a coach to be nominated, but the basic thing is, and I use the term, they really transcend the game. They're not just a great player or a great coach. They do things way bigger than that. They transcend the game. They change things. They make a difference. They transition right across the sport, and it's almost that when we're announcing the players, everyone in the game is going, yeah, I know that. I know who that is. I know who that is. And it is that sort of level of, yeah. And again, not to embarrass either of you two, is when we had the Hall of Famers at the coaches conference. It's one of those, when you speak, people listen.
Hmm.
And that's not giving you a criteria there. This is what you've got to do. It's more than just, they're quite a good player, and they did well, and they scored a lot of touchdown, or made a lot of yards, or kicked a huge amount of field goals, or made a lot of sacks.
Yeah,
they did more than that. They changed the sport. They changed the teams. They created an identity. They created, the committee who we've appointed to look after the nominations and the shortlisting. I mean, which is why we think in the inaugural group we did 30. We had 80 odd on the long list of people who you right there and then you could have gone Hall of Fame. But the whole thing about Hall of Fame is you have something every year. Yeah. If we put everybody in, well, we wouldn't have a Hall of Fame. We won't be having anybody inducted for the next 10 years potentially. So you've got to get everybody into that list, and then there's a conversation about, okay, so when do we induct them and when do they come in? So you were in that inaugural Hall of Fame, so we needed to get people in because we didn't have one. Right. And then ultimately, of course, I'd like a great museum with bronze statues of you all, with all those other things.
Hey Pete, I thought that was part of the strategy. What are you talking about?
Don't forget the yellow jackets now.
Yeah, that's part. I thought that was part of your strategy, Pete.
So what you have to look at is that these are people who've really made a difference to the sport. These are people, whether they be a player or a coach or a referee or official or a volunteer or administrator, that they do things which are beyond ordinary. They are extraordinary, is what they've done. So that's how it is. We've got another induction coming up. We'll probably look at wrapping that around some part of the in October. We're looking at, depending on what access we get to the NFL game stadium, that's all in the air at the moment, but depending on what that looks like, certainly by the end of October, we've got a major development of clubs conference and football conference. So we're going to be having a whole lot of people together, which will be also, there'll be an AGM at it, but that's not important, the AGM. It's more what do we do collectively as a sport, and hopefully if we can tag on a Hall of Fame induction as well, that's what we'll look to do.
Great. And I got one other question around this. I don't know if Farad has or not, but does the public get a vote?
No, not currently. The way we look at it at the moment is we've got a really high profile committee of people who know a British game. They're really integral to the British game. They know the game inside out. They're certainly far better than I do from the previous era. So they're a group of people who come together, they discuss who should be in and in which order we induct people, and that's the way it's done at the moment. Now, once we get to a point where the game has got huge reach, then we can get a public vote. But you got to be careful with public votes. Is a bit like any of the shows that are on the TV. You just get someone who keeps pressing the repeat button, voting, and someone comes in. And so the moment we want to make this is really esteemed. It's high profile. It's something that I care deeply about in terms of. And the thing I've seen more than anything, and you two are shining examples of that, is you're now back in the game, if you like, or you're now invested back in the game. And how do we use that level of experience and understanding and know-how in not asking you, oh, tell you what, can you come in and volunteer for me and run one of the leagues for me and do 30 hours a week volunteer? No, I don't mean that. I mean, what can you do to help grow the sport, invest in the sport, be ambassadors for the sport? And that's
Ballaz in the Middle right here. That's what it is. It's about us raising the awareness. That's what it is.
No one individual in the sport can promote the sport. No one individual can do everything. No one individual will be I'm responsible for making all these changes. It's not going to happen that way. So many sports I've been involved with, and I still use a phrase, it's logos and egos. It's about a logo or an ego that makes a difference. No, that's none of that. It's about what do we do collectively to professionalize our game and inspire more people to play and play a part and make a difference long term to the success of this game. And that's what I'm here for. I'm delighted to work with you guys to help us with our awareness.
That's right, exactly what I'm like. That's why I spoke to Hutch at the beginning of the year. He really put me back on track because I literally stepped away from the game as soon as I retired. I had it, it's just the way I felt at the time, and Hutch just made things more clearer to me. And to the point now, I want to see the game just not even be like how it was back in the day, way better and beyond. To the point where, because there's so much talent in this country, so much. Hence why they're going across the waters, or they're getting, into the BBI, the NFL, because there are talented players there, and we just want to, I just want to help, bring them back to the forefront. I did my part, and I stepped away. Yeah, fair enough, but nothing don't happen before it's time. It was time for me to come back and help out the game, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to get it back to get it past where it was before, and
that's my ambition, Roel. That is, it's not a question of, well, let's get it back to what someone says is the level it was. This is about taking it to where it needs to be to develop a sport today for the next 10 years or more, and that's what we're going to do. It's how it's going to be. And I always say this, this probably the last thing I'll say is that I'm not going to make all the popular decisions. We'll just try and make as many right decisions. This year, there's some things that happened in the game which were wrong. We did, we've got a huge amount of volunteers doing a huge amount of work, and were things done as well as they could have been? No, I admit that. Totally hands up. I'm accountable, by the way. I'm responsible. However, it won't happen again. And what we need to do going forward is learn, take that forward. So we've had some great conversations in the last few weeks about what that looks like and how do we take that forward. But equally, that also means some things will have to change. It's not just we'll just do it how we've always done it. We'll do things differently as well, and we'll think differently as well as do differently.
Right. Thanks, Pete, man. I mean, you're Ballaz in the Middle are well and truly happy that you made the time to sit down and chop it up with us, to have these discussions about things. Yes, you're 100%, you are accountable, but small, like people like me and Roel, we're responsible to try and raise the awareness of American football in Great Britain, and that's what we plan to do. So man, we thank you very much for your time.
Appreciate
and no doubt we'll see each other soon.
Yeah,
we will. I will.
Most definitely. And I'm gonna say good rice, good meat, good God, let's eat.
Great stuff, guys. Really appreciate your time.
Most appreciated, man. Thank you
Thanks
for
a lot,
the
Pete.
time. So, what we got coming up next?
What do we got, man?
We ain't telling no one. You're just gonna have to wait and come see us again.
You know that. You know that.
Next week. But on that one, sorry, let me set up in front of this camera. Hopefully we'll be back in the studio on the next podcast, which will be good.
Right. Get out of these boxes, man. These boxes are hot as hell.
Hot, small. But yeah, so you know what to do. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. You know, if you got any comments, anything that you want us to talk about or chop up about, you know, just let us know. You know, we will read the comments, pay attention to them. If we think it's worth talking about, we will. You know, if we don't, you know, don't hold nothing against us. And on that one, you know the saying, peace out.
Peace.
Let's eat.